Screen Park Unlimited.
This is episode 26, and the first, these two ghost stories are from the Isle of Wight. And the first ghost story is called The Laughing Cavalier. As one of the most ancient manor houses on the island, Hazley just has to be haunted. With its rich and scandalous history, there should be ghosts aplenty, and the manor more than lives up to expectations. Listed in the Domesday Book, Hazley is a part medieval with various additions in Tudor, Stuart, Georgian and Victorian times. The monks of Cura farmed Hazley for 400 years until the dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII. Its most colourful accompaniments were undoubtedly Dalzable Mill, a rich, beautiful widow, and her lover Sir Edward Horsey, the captain of the island. The pair threw rituous parties and entertained lavishly there until Sir Edward's death, apparently of the plague, at Hazley in 1582. The manor was sold to the Lord Chief Justice of England, Sir Thomas Fleming, one of the judges at the Gunpowder Plot trial, and it remained in the Fleming family for the next 350 years. In the 19th century, its fortunes began to decline when tenant farmers occupied it. In 1952, the house was sold and converted into farm workers' dwellings. By 1974, Hazley stood empty, semi-derelict, and was almost beyond repair when Ray Young, a former mayor of Bradding, bought the manor with his late wife Christina in 1976 and opened it to the public. Hazley started to live again, as did its ghost. One spirit, that of a handsome gentleman, Sir Edward Horsey, perhaps, is always laughing. He has been seen on several occasions, and one visitor, Charles Stuart Warwick, was able to sketch the laughing ghost. His drawings showed a figure in knickerbocker breeches, stockings, and open-necked shirt, fastened near the waist with one band, a leather belt, boots, and a wide-brimmed black hat. Charles thought the ghost was terribly jolly. He threw back his head with silent laughter. I could actually see some of his blackened teeth, he said. Another visitor added to this description a few years later, when she too met the laughing ghost. He has a beard, a moustache, and wore a sword about his waist, said the startled woman. One summer afternoon in 1991, several ladies praised the authenticity and attention to detail of Hazley's restoration. They were especially taken with the group of monks fishing in one of the old pools in the manor's grounds. What they didn't realise was that the monks were ghosts from a time when the manor belonged to Corey Abbey, and the ponds or stews were stocked with carp by the monks. Some people felt an unhappy presence upstairs, which was probably Hazley's tragic young ghost, Amelia Bastini, who hanged herself in an attic room on May the 7th, 1854. The inquest held the next day heard how another serving maid discovered her body. She was buried immediately, and after the inquest, in an unmarked grave in unsecrated ground. Hers was a sad little story. A local beauty, Amelia, fell in love with a charming visitor to Hazley, a London surgeon who took advantage of her. By the time Amelia discovered she was with child, her former lover was engaged to marry a daughter of the manor. The wedding was to take place the very next day. Disgraced and pregnant, poor Amelia told fellow servants, "This is my last days at work at Hazley." Then she went alone to her attic room to commit suicide. Her former lover continued with his wedding on the day that Amelia was buried. Self-destruction was a mortal sin, and an echo of Amelia's despair lingers in those attic rooms. Another melancholy spirit at the manor is thought to be an 18th century daughter of the Fleming family. This girl too loved unwisely, with unhappy consequences, falling in love with a man who was socially her inferior. Her father forbade the match, but they took no notice when he discovered her disobedience. Squire Fleming whipped his daughter so savagely that she was scarred for life. For the rest of her life, she wore long-sleeved dresses to hide the livid marks on her arms and body. The beating also left her mentally scarred. She died a bitter and lonely spinster. Her spirit has not found peace, and Angie Newman, a physician, saw her mournful ghost when she worked at Hazley in the 1980s. I was working in the house when I felt drawn to the window overlooking the gardens near the stream. Looking out, I saw the ghost of a lady aged about 30, walking in the sunshine. She wore a turquoise day dress with a bustle. Her long-sleeved dress had fancy pointed cuffs that completely hid her arms and hands. She wore her light brown hair piled up under a bonnet, added Angie. James Way's young son was born at Hazley as a toddler, and he loved to explore the old house. When we were dismantling a concrete wall dividing the house, we lost James one day. We eventually found him wandering up in the empty main house. He wasn't frightened, and he told us he'd been talking to the lady, Way said. So that's the end of that ghost story. The next ghost story is called The Friendly Ghost. As a boy of 4, Freddie Morris moved with his family to Hazley when his father worked on the farm there. At that time, the manor house was divided into 2 houses. We had the right-hand half, which included the great kitchen. My mother was aware that from a young age I could see and hear spirits. My grandmother had been psychic too. One night I slept in the main bedroom, below what we knew as the tack room. I think I had been moved there because I had measles or chicken pox, and it was nearer Mum's room. My sister, who normally had that room, had been moved for the duration of my illness. Everything was okay when my mother put me to bed, but in the middle of the night I was aware of the bed lifting and turning around on its axis. I was so scared that I pulled the blankets over my head. The next morning, when she found my bed had turned around, my mother accused me and my sister playing games, but she knew that something's odd had happened because she moved me to another bedroom. When I visited the manor during Wei Young's tenure, I saw that the floor and ceiling between the tack room and the bedroom had been removed, possibly due to what, as there was a large hole in the ceiling and roof when we lived there. This bedroom was the one where Mr. Young had the tableau of Sir Edward Horsey dying of plague in his room. I recalled there were old medlar and walnut trees in the garden where I used to sit with my friends. Mr. Downer, who no one else could see. Mr. Downer was a kindly spirit, but he had a mischievous sense of humour, for he would tell me to do things which got me into trouble. Sometimes he would meet me by the gate which led from the garden into the farmyard, but usually he was by the main gate to the drive. He had grey hair, a bushy beard, and wore a long leather apron. He told me he was the ostler, but I didn't know what this was. Years later, when I saw a picture of someone in a similar apron, I realised that Mr. Downer had worked with the horses. On one occasion, Mum was burning some household rubbish, including some curtains, which Mr. Downer told me to pick up. I did so and promptly dropped the clothes again. As it was red hot, I bore the scars on my fingers for many years. I remember that there was a water tank by the back door. I was afraid of heights, but my sister Jacqueline would climb up and look in. I remember seeing a ghostly lady in a long dress with an apron and bonnet nearby. She gave my sister a helping shove and pushed her in. I got the blame. Sharon Fox of Sandown was just 18 when she worked in the tea rooms and house at Hazley. She would often hear the sound of small feet walking across the floor in the tea room, and I look over the counter expecting to see one of the owner's dogs, but there was nothing there. Upstairs in the main bedroom, however, and in a little staircase off it, there was a far more uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes as I crossed the room, the hairs on the back of my neck would go up. The temperature would fall and become freezing cold. I would feel a confusion of emotions. There were of anger, sadness, vindictiveness, despair and guilt. Strangely, I could actually step in and out of this concentration of feeling. It was very localized. After a few days, I had had enough. I went downstairs and said to Christiana Young, I don't mind the ghost in the tea room, but I can't stand the one upstairs. When she told me that was where the serving maid had hung herself, I was shocked, because I hadn't heard that story. Suddenly that well of emotions made sense. In the year 2000, Ray sold Hazley Manor to Anthony and Vivienne Roberts, both of whom are doctors. They have continued the renovation and improvement works started by Ray, and although it is no longer open to the public, Hazley enjoyed a brief spell as a popular wedding venue for several years. Anthony is a skeptical of Hazley's haunted past, like Vinnie keeps her footsteps when she keeps a more open mind, but particularly since she has heard the sound of ghostly footsteps when she has been alone there at night. These ghosts from the manor's checkered past never bothered Ray. They moved about the manor on their ghostly business, keeping themselves very much to themselves. Many manors have ghosts, and it is only fitting that such a fine old house as Hazley should have its share. So that's the end of this episode. So it's time to say cue those credits. Goodbye.